Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about tips for your sanity as an animal empath. We need some guidance on how to really learn how to cope with this. I mean, it's not so much coping, it's just learning how to manage this. And these tips are kind of geared towards your own sanity, like the title says. Okay, so I know that sounds silly. So I do have notes, so I will be looking over here too. So quite often we find ourselves in environments where it's not the most ideal thing. I remember back in the days, just a quick little story, before I really discovered what was actually going on with me, I was working as a student veterinarian technician, sorry. And I was deeply triggered there. And one case comes up into mind. A young male cat had come in because he was having trouble urinating. And of course, I'm in the middle of this. I was, dealing with the person up front and then being in the back helping the veterinarian. And this cat was in critical condition. He actually did die in the back, and the vet worked very diligently to bring this cat back to life, but he was blocked so badly, and it happens quite a bit. So the guy at the front was half drunk and didn't really care what was going on in the back. And the vet's doing everything she can to save this cat. And in the meantime, I'm going, like, I couldn't understand this guy's perspective at all, because I was coming from the perspective that we need to do everything we can to save all the animals. And that was the perspective I was taking. So what ended up happening, of course, it was a big trigger for me because I didn't understand. The cat did survive. I don't remember what exactly happened, but I was deeply upset by this. And I'm sure you can relate to this, where you've been in many situations where you've been upset because they weren't doing everything they possibly could to save this animal, and it wasn't their priority. They were more thinking of, I don't know if it was in this case a guy was thinking about money, or we didn't give him permission, or whatever the story is. But anyway, I was deeply triggered. So it wasn't long after that that I realized a couple of things, and this is what I've learned. So hopefully these tips will help you. So in my notes, we are quite often around other people, and there's a big goose that just went by. It was actually pretty cool. It was a male goose. We are triggered by how other people treat horses, and that's our first clue right there. So I'm going to talk about my experience and what I've done and the things that I've learned. And I believe I have a few tips. And at the end of this video, I do have something a little bit for you to think about, and how this could translate into your horse. I believe there is a way that this translates into your horse. We just need to be able to sit with it and figure it out. So it may get a little heavy at the end, and it may cause it might trigger you, is what I'm saying. So just sit with it. And see how you feel about it and how it translates to the horse, and how we'll just carry on. Okay, so I come from a background where it's very competitive. I'm involved in horse racing, so you can't get any more competitive than that. I mean, I'm sure you could in the jumping world or dressage world or reining, whatever, barrel racing, it doesn't matter. I'm involved in a competitive world. And I don't want this to be about horse racing, because that's not what this is about. I know some people object to it, and others don't. I'm not going to go down that road with anybody. It's not about horse racing. Let me put it to you plain and simple. This is not about horse racing. I am not about horse racing. Yes, I am involved in that, but it's not about horse racing. So just to clarify that. So quite often we find ourselves in these situations, and it's very difficult for us. And it's difficult because there's stuff going on in the barn. We're dealing with our own triggers because we see that, let's say, it doesn't even matter what barn you're in. It could be anywhere. You see that the horse isn't being treated well. Then you have the people in the barn. I mean, not only are we dealing with that stuff, we're dealing with the people. And quite often these people, I find in my experience, and there's nothing against these people, they're not able to deal with their emotions. So I don't even know how to describe these people, but they're not at their best. Let's just leave it at that. And what happens is, so we're in the middle here, and we're dealing with the things that trigger us about the horse and how it's not being treated that well and how things are being ignored. And, we can maybe sense that there's an issue with the horse and we tell people about it, but it's to no avail. And you don't feel that, their treatment is right. And so there's that whole gamut of things. And then there's the other side of the people that are not so nice. And we pick up on that. So we've got two things going on here. We've got our own triggers and we've got the people. And of course we're thinking, okay, how do we get this horse, how do we treat this horse better? Not saying that in the horse racing world they don't get treated better. Believe me, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that we've seen stuff that we may feel isn't what it should be. And that's what I'm talking about. The horse is being treated well. It's just that we feel it could be better. So we are in this mix of all this stuff, and we think people are being mean, and at the same time we feel sorry for the horse, or we feel bad for the horse because, let's say, the treatment isn't effective enough. They're missing the point. I've seen many horses where I feel it in my lower back that the horse's back is really bothering them, but they're working on the front legs, like that kind of stuff. Like, it's just from their perspective, they're doing what they can to help this horse. But from our perspective, there's more. So we're definitely triggered here, definitely. So we all feel the same way. I'm sure you can relate to that. You feel that you're definitely triggered, and you think it's, whatever you think when it's going on with the horse. There's a whole bunch of dynamics going on here if you're working on a barn. And actually, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I got visitors, birds flying in. There's a robin. And when I talked about that cat being dying literally on the back table, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Like, you love these animals so much, but the people around you they just suck. They don't get it, and you don't understand why they don't get it. So I totally get it, because I've been there. I got tons of experience with that. And so eventually what I learned with this clinic and the cat is that I just couldn't do it. So I went into another area of vet medicine, and eventually I just got bored and I left. But the case may be it's a love-hate relationship, because we were coming at the horse or any animal. And if you can relate to this, which I'm sure you can, if you're watching my videos, you'll relate. You feel like you have the need to save these animals. And that's why we get involved, is because we need to save these animals. And you feel like you got to bring them all home, because nobody will step up to the plate. Nobody will. So I'm sure you can relate to that. And you can kind of see what you're up against here. You're bumping up against all kinds of things here. And it's really hard to know what you're doing here. So I have a few tips for you. Let's see, how many do I actually have? I have, 4 tips for you. Okay, so enough of that rambling. So let's get into the tips here. My first tip for you to kind of get out of that dynamic of things going on is you don't need to save all the animals. You just don't. It took me forever to learn that, but you really don't need to save all the animals. And when you actually make that realization, you can pull yourself away from that and not be so triggered by it, because there's always going to be somebody whose purpose in life is to save that animal. And that was a big relief for me, and hopefully that's a big relief for you, that you don't actually have to save every animal you come across. Yes, I understand that it tugs on your heartstrings and you want to do everything you can for that horse, or whichever animal that happens to be. But because we talk mostly about horses here, I totally understand why you feel the need to save this animal, especially if you're going to a rescue place or auctions or anything like that. Sorry about that. So I totally get that. But just remember, you don't have to save all the animals, especially if the cats follow you home or a puppy follows you home. we can go through the proper channels and make sure that this animal's looked after, and we can save our energy. I know that sounds really cruel and really selfish, but we have to learn how to maintain our own energy, or we're going to continuously end up in that dynamic of what I talked about in the first part of this video. We're going to be bouncing in between humans' emotions and our own triggers, and it's just super, super draining. And the idea here is to keep you sane. So the next tip that I have for you, probably the most important tip, I got more coming, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. There is nothing wrong with looking after you first. I know it sounds ridiculous. It seems like it's selfish, but it isn't. It's the only way you're going to learn to distinguish what is yours and what isn't. And when it isn't yours, you have that choice at that moment when you realize what's not yours. You can either engage with it or just walk it away. That's it. If you work on your triggers, you actually gain more control of your empath ability. And having more control over it and using it as a tool, rather it overpowering you, is key here. This is what we're getting at. We want to be able to use our abilities to allow it to come through us, but we use it in a way that benefits us. We don't need to be bombarded by our abilities. And so when we keep you sane and we're in that environment, your empathic abilities are bombarding you. So we're going to flip the table here and have your empathic abilities work for you. So when you don't work on your triggers, I wrote this here and I'm just trying to make sense because sometimes I just do quick little notes. If you work on your own triggers, you definitely take care of you. You once you realize that you're triggered, you'll know, oh, I'm up against something here, something for me to look at, and that's your cue. But if we don't work on our triggers, and you're trying to save or do whatever you're doing within that situation, you're bypassing your own needs. The only reason that you're triggered by whatever it is that you see is because it's telling you that you have an unmet need within yourself. So if you are triggered, let's say, for example, I see the geese landing in the little pond over there. I don't know if you can actually see like the little flowers and everything back there. I picked this spot because there's little flowers. Okay, so if we are triggered, well, there's an unmet need that we have going on, and we need to look at that. And what are we doing? Why are we bypassing ourselves and trying to save that horse? Because I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. It feels to me like I'm rambling a little bit, but we're bypassing our own needs when we are triggered and we ignore that. We go in and we try to understand the situation. We get overwhelmed and all that stuff. So we're bypassing our needs by feeling like we have to do whatever it is we got to do, whether it's bring more treatment or save that animal or anything like that. It's definitely a trigger for you to look at because there's an unmet need, and that is why you're triggered. If you can save them continuously, you are distracting yourself from you. If you continuously go into that where you find yourself drained, you are bypassing you. And that's not good. What we need to do is we need to plug into us instead of that. And because we are so attuned to animals, we just know what's going on. We can feel it, we can see it, we understand all that good stuff. And we know how to help that horse. And that's great. But when it goes down the line where we forget about ourselves, we're crossing the line here. We need to look after ourselves first and foremost. And hopefully that all makes sense. Sometimes I feel like I'm rambling. I mean, it kind of makes sense. And then anyway. So you need to know how you feel first, whether it feels good or it doesn't feel so good. You need to know that within yourself first in order to truly comprehend what the horse needs. It helps you when we get to that place where we actually know what we're feeling and thinking, and we're using our empathic abilities for the greater good rather than them overpowering us, and we have the control of it. It's a win-win because we can manage ourselves. better. We're not bypassing ourselves. We're not looking outside of us to have our needs met. And it's a win-win for the horse because they get their needs met. Then they're allowed to be themselves, if that makes sense. We don't show up with the excess baggage, and that gives them the freedom to be themselves. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but anyway, we'll keep moving along. And when we create this situation where we're plugging into ourselves, and for me, I know when something is triggering me, and because I've already been there and I've actually worked through this trigger where I don't need to save the animals, I can actually say to myself, okay, is there actually something that I can actually do for this horse? Or does somebody else need to look after this horse? And 9 times out of 10, I can fully remove myself from the situation when I know that I am not capable of looking after another horse or giving what that horse needs when somebody else is willing to step in and take that place. It takes the pressure off and it conserves your energy, and you know that that horse will be looked after. You know that. That horse will be provided for. I mean, maybe it has its own journey, and that's the other thing we've got to think of too, is that when we remove ourselves from the situation and somebody will step in, and that's that horse's journey, and maybe another person is going to come in so that that person can carry on with that journey with that horse so that they can learn something out of it. So it's not just about I don't think it's being selfish at all, maintaining your energy and keeping yourself from being drained, because you're just going to get sucked in big time, and you know you're going to be drained. It's going to be a continuous cycle, a continuous amount of problems. When one's resolved, another one's shows up. So when you actually say, I'm removing myself from this situation, it's not because you're being mean or selfish. You're understanding the bigger picture, and you're allowing the journey to continue without your participation, is kind of what I'm getting at here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Here's my next tip. You cannot turn this off. As much as you want to turn it off, you can't. All we can do is learn how to manage it and use it to empower us so that we can create the life that we want, where we're not drained, we're not worn out, we don't have exhaustion, we're not full of anxiety, we're not in overwhelm. I can't do it for very long because it just drives me crazy after a while, but I can go into a mall, and depending on how many people are there, I can actually function in the mall. I'm not feeling overwhelmed. And I know when it's time, okay, we got to go because I can't take it anymore. When you get to that point, you understand that you need to leave. You understand in any situation that this isn't going to work for you. You're going to go into overwhelm. You're going to go into anxiety. That's your cue to remove yourself from the situation. So whether it's a mall, whether it's anything with your empathic abilities and the connection with animals, you have the ability to be able to remove yourself once you plug into yourself, manage your abilities, and remove yourself from the situation when it's not going to work for you, when it's not going to create that win-win. You can remove yourself. So just remember, you can manage it and you cannot shut it off. So we need to learn how to manage it. Now the next one is quite important because I felt this one was really important. Now I always use the example of being in the horse racing world. I love those horses down there. I'm a thoroughbred girl through and through. But what I've learned, excuse me, with this ability is that you have 2 choices. And I kind of sort of have been alluding to that. We always have 2 choices. In this case, because I'm in such a competitive world, some of the people, they work out their issues with other people and the horses. And you get to see who they really are, especially with the horse. I'm not sure what that is, why people, they put up such a mask with other people. And that's interesting to me too, because I'm like, I can see right through it, and I know you can relate to it. But the other thing too that I've noticed is they let their guard down even more with the horse, and you really see what they're all about. Like when you actually see a person and you're like, I can see right through that, and then they are with their horse, and then you see it even more. It's confirming for you that your initial feeling about this person was actually right. So that's an interesting thing. So the two choices that I was faced with, which I'm sure you're faced with too, and maybe you don't even know this, I don't know. You can choose to stay with the intention of one, showing quietly that there is a different way with a horse. You can honor your energy by showing people quietly, and that doesn't mean telling them anything. Just be who you are. If you're relaxed and easygoing and happy inside, and the horses sense that energy and they're quiet and calm around you, you can choose to show those people that there is another way with the horse, that you can do things differently with the horse and be kinder instead of actually, I know this is more mainstream, but just training with a kinder way. And quite often in the horse racing world, there's usually some of the old school type trainers, they have one program for all the horses rather than training individually and giving them the individual attention that they need. So there's that element of it as well. So you can go in there and lead by example, I guess is what I'm saying here. You can lead by example. You can show that there is a different way with a horse, that there's a different way to respect their body and their mind and their soul and all that good stuff. The other way too, and a lot of people do this, and I totally get it, is they leave the situation because it's just too much. It's just too freaking much. They can't deal with it. You pull yourself out, you honor your energy, and others will step up. So that's the two choices that I feel that we have working in an environment like that. We can just remove ourselves and just let other people take care of it and let them have their journey and save our energy. Or what I've chosen to do is lead by example, show them that there is a different way. And it actually does show up. I've had people actually say to me, I don't know what it is about you, but all these horses are so good for you. It must be something about your aura. So you can practice your empathic abilities and understand there is a choice. It's totally doable. You can do it. I'm doing it now. I'm totally doing it. I choose to stay in that environment. Some days, most days are actually not bad. They're quite easy, and other days are not. And you need to know that when you're in that kind of environment, whether you're in whatever situation you're in with your horse. I mean, maybe you're lucky and you're at home, but some people aren't that lucky and they have their horses somewhere else, or, they're, whatever. Maybe they could have a rescue organization. Maybe you're a volunteer. But you need to know that there's two choices here. You can lead by example. I mean, granted, you may have to follow the rules of what the barn says. That's fine. But you can still lead by example and just maintain your energy, maintain your center. Don't get swayed by the triggers. Don't get swayed by... another good example, like if you're swayed by, let's just say it's a little bit of mistreatment. Maybe they got a smack in the belly or something. And if you actually quietly, just by in your actions, show people that there is a different way, it will rub off. I mean, it's a slow way to do this. It really is a slow process. I mean, I've been to quite a few different places in the States and in Canada, and it's really, really a slow process. But what you're doing, it ripples out. And even though it's the slowest process ever, you don't ever want to go in there and say, do it this way, because that's harsh. And people reject that. But when you're softer and you're in your energy and you're maintaining your energy and the horses are responding to that, people do notice. And I've actually, when I've trained my own horses in a horse racing setting, I've actually had other trainers just kind of linger around watching what I'm doing, because I've always been a small trainer. I've only had a couple horses, and I think I've done pretty well with my horses. They've always run, for a lower price, and my horses have done well. And I've actually had trainers like watching what I'm doing, and I know people are watching me. And I've had other cases too where people will try to mimic exactly everything that I'm doing. And that could be anything I'm doing. Maybe I quite often like to spend time with my horses, and I will graze them by hand and brush them outside of the stall. Like, I do things completely different, and people notice that. And when you actually step more into your role and honor your abilities, people are going to notice that. They're going to notice. And they start doing this exact same things that you're doing. You know you're on the right track. So that's the good thing about this. Okay, so when you make the two choices there, you can either leave or stay and make the difference. And that's hopefully, what you're going to end up doing is changing the dynamics slowly, quietly, and on a subtle level. People do notice, trust me. So now this is a little bit of the deeper part that I wanted to leave you with this today. So this entire video was inspired by a post I had seen on Facebook, and I'll just read this for you. And it does tie in, because when we're saving animals, there's like a codependency issue there. We're not getting a need met, and we're hoping that this horse will bring us the need, and it works with people as well. So here we go. Hopefully that all makes sense, because it seems like I'm just jumping into this codependency thing, but the Saviour, saving, and codependency is all kind of one and the same. I've done a video about that before too. Anyway, here's the post. What really happens when we go around to trying to save others? I don't even read my own writing here. I don't even know what that says. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm talking about people here. That's what I was saying here. So what happens when we go around trying to save others, especially when we're helping other people? And this applies to horses as well. You can just flip it around and talk about horses. It's the same thing. Without question, we are the perpetrator. And we automatically make who we're trying to save the victim. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. What we fail to realize is where we're consistently seeking to save others, we make them the victim by robbing them of their own God-given right to their own lessons. This is so powerful for me. And the post continues on to say, we actually cripple the other individual spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically, or a combination of all of them. It doesn't have to be everything, but it could be a combination of all of them. Because of you, they have to live this reality over and over again. And I know that that could be triggering, because we're always thinking, oh, what's going to happen to this horse? What's going to happen? Is he going to end up in the auction? Is he going to go to the kill buyer, or whatever they call them? That I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. That's something for you and for me to discover on our own. And let's go on with the post. If you're willing to be brave enough and honest with yourself, you'll soon realize it was never about them. But the truth is, you were actually trying to save yourself from the discomfort you'd feel if you see them fail. Turns out saving others is extremely selfish. And may we all be brave enough to stay in our own lane. And this was written by a woman by the name of Melissa Gale. And with the meme that came with it, codependency is driven by the agreement that I will work harder on your problem and your life than you do. And this is not love. So that's the heavy part of the this video. And I know that this is translatable to the horse and our situation with the horse and why we feel like we need to save them and be there, and that whole dynamic. There is a whole gamut of issues going on here, but I wanted to leave you with that so that you had the time to process what's actually going on here. It's bigger than you think. And hopefully my tips have given you a way to keep your sanity, because all of that is my experience. And when I'm involved in any of those dynamics, there is that Saviour codependency issue going on. And it's important for us to realize that, because you take back your power, you give yourself the needs that weren't met, and you are no longer triggered by any of that. And that's a big deal. That's really, really huge, I think. So I'd like to leave that with you today. Thank you for being here to the end of this video. I appreciate it. Hopefully you don't find it boring that I'm just sitting here talking with you. I watched another video and I feel like I'm being so boring just sitting here talking to you. But For these videos, I'm talking directly to the empath, so I feel like having no distractions is the way to go. And so hopefully that works for you, and hopefully you're enjoying the flowers and the birds, and hopefully you can see all that. And the other thing too, I like to make sure that I ask you to like and subscribe and share these videos, and make sure you comment, because if we can help if I can help any empaths that are working with horses, I'd love to be able to do that. And when you're actually liking and subscribing and sharing and all that good stuff, you're helping me, I guess, like rank in YouTube. And I appreciate that. Like I really appreciate all my new subscribers lately. It's been amazing how many people are actually into this kind of stuff. And I definitely think it needs to be more mainstream so that we can actually like build out our abilities instead of it just like slamming us. Like there's no need for that. We can learn how to manage this and actually create a life that we desire and what we want. It's very possible. It's completely possible. So like I said, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed doing it, and this video was entirely inspired by that post. If it triggers you, that's something for you to look at. For me, it's even something for me to look at and how it's related. But I know when I show up with the horse and I'm in that mode where I need to save and I feel like, I got to help everybody with their problems and rescue them from a problem, that baggage shows up as a huge boulder between me and the horse. What it looks like for me isn't going to look the same for you. That's for you to discover. And that's what this video is all about. So when we show up with our baggage, what does that boulder look like and how does that impact your horse? So that's all I have for you for this video. Stay tuned for another video. Until then, take care, everybody.